We, he's right. We still don't. So now we've decided that the best way to tell this story is simply to extract the best of the best from the multitude of documentaries that we've already produced. The story of Bernard McFadden, the greatest story never told.
Although virtually unknown today, Bernard McFadden was a household name in the 1920s and 30s. Even today, journalism schools recognize McFadden, along with William Randolph Hearst, as being the two most important publishers in the first half of the 20th century. His wealth allowed him the luxury of piloting his own private airplane. His business interests included real estate development and a multitude of business enterprises. The McFadden publishing offices were located on Broadway in New York City. The sign on the side of McFadden Publishing proudly announced the largest newsstand sales in the world, a true statement. The cornerstone of McFadden Publications was True Story, which at the time was the largest selling magazine in the history of the industry. Another successful True magazine was True Detective, where McFadden published the names and photographs of criminals that he called the 10 most wanted. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was so impressed by this feature that he instructed the Bureau to begin publishing a list of the 10 most wanted criminals being sought for federal crimes. This was the beginning of America's most wanted list of criminals. An indication of McFadden's popularity was the fact that 3 biographies on his life had been published. McFadden's fame and fortune provided access to the rich and famous, as we see one of his daughters in a mock boxing pose with heavyweight boxing champ Jack Dempsey, with child star The Little Princess Shirley Temple. Here's the king of Hollywood, Clark Gable, with the popular crooner Rudy Vallée, and in his office with his family and silent movie heartthrob Rudolph Valentino. McFadden's scope of influence even reached to the White House, as illustrated in this photo of McFadden and President Franklin Roosevelt.
How is it possible that most people have never heard of the man that developed the concept of the 10 most wanted, which is used today by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and even the subject of a popular TV show? A man who was so well known at that time that he had total access to some of the most popular and famous personalities of that era. Certain vested interests have had more than a century, 100 years, to make their case, to expunge, to delete, to erase the great legacy of Bernard McFadden. To explain this more fully, we'd now like to show you a clip from our 2015 documentary that we called The Case to Restore the Legacy of Bernard McFadden. We want you, the viewer, to serve as a jury as we present our case to restore the legacy of Bernard McFadden.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're not only going to prove that Bernard McFadden is the father of the wellness movement, we're going to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that his methods on preventative medicine are not only recommended, but claimed by today's healthcare industry as their own. His methods have been suppressed for more than 100 years. Okay, now stay with me for a second, because this is important. I mean, today's important, because today we are going to restore the legacy of the great Bernard McFadden. In order to properly present this case, I have to give you a little background. There are events in McFadden's early childhood that actually shaped his character. There are events that gave him the passion to go on a lifelong crusade for wellness. There are events that gave him the motivation and the drive to go from rags to riches and live the American dream. When McFadden was a young boy, a smallpox pandemic was sweeping the nation. In an effort to curb the spread, an inoculation procedure was developed. The doctor used a sharp instrument to cut into Bernard's skin and inserted pus from a live smallpox pustule. After receiving his inoculation, the young McFadden had a horrible reaction and became severely ill. Being bedridden for months required constant care from his loving mother. McFadden's world was forever changed when a doctor was testing a new patent medicine for tuberculosis on his mother. Tragically, his mother died the following day, and McFadden believed the medicine administered by the doctor caused her untimely death. Bernard was heartbroken. His life seemed hopeless. After losing both of his parents, he was truly alone and destitute. And not having any immediate family, he was placed into an orphanage.
I'd like to take a break right here and just tell you a quick story about a movie script that I wrote back in the 1980s. This script embodies the American dream, the story of a poor orphan boy who becomes a multi-millionaire. Believe it or not, I got this script to some very, very important Hollywood personalities. One of them being Kirk Douglas, who wrote me back a very nice letter. Secondly, Greg Madej, who was an executive producer at Warner Brothers. Greg never wrote me a letter, but he actually called me on the phone and we talked for a while. Greg said, my father read it, he loves it, he knew Bernard McFadden. He says, this is the best story of all. But he says, everybody I talked to did not know the name Bernard McFadden. It would be impossible to get any backing to make a movie about this person. So I began to shop the script around, and those people that did read the script told me they thought the most heart-rendering, poignant parts of the script were about McFadden's days in the orphanage. No words could describe the brutality of an orphanage in those dark days following the Civil War. As we told you earlier in the production, we don't have any funding for this, but we are going to do one reenactment from two great actors that just happen to be my grandsons, Hunter and Sawyer, reading from my script.
Bernard, you're so out of breath. Stop moving those heavy boxes. I want to. I'm building up my strength. Do you remember what the doctor said? He said I was too weak to run, swim, play sports, or anything like that. The doctor was wrong, Ed. It doesn't matter. We'll never be able to leave this horrible place anyway. Yes, we will, and someday I'll make sure nobody has to live like this ever again.
What's really amazing is that McFadden kept his promise and built an orphanage for homeless boys. And believe me, the conditions at McFadden's orphanage were infinitely superior to anything he ever knew growing up in an orphanage as a young boy. But now, let's return to the case to restore the legacy of Bernard McFadden.
Okay, it's time that we quickly recap the events of McFadden's childhood